Hello, you're watching Talking Europe. European political leaders tried to switch off for a few weeks in August, but they had a lot of things at the back of their minds. Russian forces advancing in the Donbas in eastern Ukraine, a summit in Alaska between the Russian and American presidents, which set off alarm bells in Kyiv and in the EU. And members of European governments are still smarting from a trade deal with Donald Trump that leaves a 15% tariff ceiling on most EU products coming into the US. This as the European Union wants to assert its competitiveness and its strategic weight in the world. Well, I'm joined by two experts to look at some of these challenges. Catherine Mathieu is an economist specialized in economic affairs, and she is a member of the OFCE, the French observatory that studies economic circumstances. Welcome to you.
Thank you for the invitation.
And I'm here also with Yves Bertoncini, a consultant in European public affairs, a former director of the Jacques Delors Institute, and a former vice president of the International European Movement. Welcome to you as well, Yves.
Thank you.
I'd like to start with you. We had this Coalition of the Willing meeting in Paris a few days ago. What's your read on that? Do you think it clarified anything at all?
At least Europe did what it had to do. The Europeans, and even more, because there were 39 countries, so the core were the European, but Australia was there, New Zealand, Canada. But then there was a massive push from the US on the Europeans for them to take their share, of the potential post-ceasefire in Ukraine by sending troops, by sending so-called security guarantees, so by providing arms, ammunition, troops, maybe in the air, on the ground. And then many countries, 26, said they would participate in such an effort. Well, it's kind of variable geometry effort because, for example, the Germans said clearly that they won't send any troops on the ground, but they will provide support from different fields, on different fields. The same is true for Italy. You have some leading countries such as France, the UK, and the Baltic states. And as I've said, it's part of the deal made with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump said, take your share. It's in Europe. What happens is in Europe. In this sense, it's good that the Europeans did this by sending the ball back to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump had met Putin in Anchorage. You have said this. Apparently, he had given a deadline, 2 weeks, for Vladimir Putin to meet Zelensky. This did not happen. So normally, the Europeans said now to Trump, we did what you expect from us. Now, please help us trying to push Putin to go to a ceasefire.
So how, Catherine Mathieu, how do you rate the whole transatlantic relationship right now? How does it look to you both on the political and economic front in general?
It looks tough because we have, of course, Donald Trump, who has a very specific US agenda, and we have the European Union members who are still in another world, I would say, where there are rules, when you trade with rule, when there is the issue of order. So we are really going in two different directions, and this is very hard for the European Union. And in my view, what happened with the trade deal, which was signed by Ursula von der Leyen this summer in a golf resort owned by Donald Trump in Scotland, says a lot about this attitude. The Europeans try to be nice with Donald Trump, but I'm afraid this is not the best strategy, as we could see from the trade deals with China and with other countries. It seems more relevant to show that you are strong when you trade with Donald Trump than to say, okay, we are going to be nice with you.
So you think Europe didn't stand up for its trade interests, basically?
Yes, I think so. I think Europe tried to be, as also Teresa Ribera herself said, the European Union tried to be was nice with Donald Trump, but that's probably not the best strategy. And when we see what happened with Canada, for instance, with China, it shows clearly that we need to show we are strong and not to say, okay, we are going to follow what you like. We are going to agree not only to the issue of tariffs, but also to say we are going to buy energy but how, we don't know. We are going to invest in the US. How, who will do that? We don't know. So there are many open questions, and there is also the issue of digital transactions, which is a strong point where the US are not going to be nice with us.
Yeah, and Trump is actually still making threats on that whole question of digital rules. But Yves, just your thoughts on what Catherine was saying about the EU playing too nice with Trump. Do you agree with that?
Well, first of all, yes, I agree with the fact that the image of, this kind of deal negotiated in the Gulf resort is a disastrous image for Europe, and the strength we should have shown. And Mrs. von der Leyen, I think, misbehaved in doing this. But having said this, on the substance, of course, the EU-US so-called trade deal is unbalanced, but this imbalance reflects two other imbalances. And the first, of course, is the military imbalance, because we were talking about Ukraine, the Russian invasion. This is an existential threat to the Europeans. And for this, at the given stage of our European military development, we need the US. We need our allies to be there, to stay with us. So there was a first attempt to be nice with Trump so that he could consider trying to stay and in support of the efforts of Ukraine against Russia.
So
and
fear is an underlying motivating factor all the way through.
Of course, so that was the first thing. This is an existential threat. And after that, trade, this is only business. And then second imbalance, by the way, we should underline this. We are very good in our trade business with the US. There are surpluses, so let's not complain about this. I mean, the Europeans at large, the German in particular, the Italians, we have massive trade surpluses in the goods. So Trump wanted to diminish this imbalance, and that is why the deal was unbalanced as well.
I just want to come on to, because we don't have a huge amount of time, but Catherine Mathieu, on the whole Mercosur deal, which was submitted by the European Commission to member states for approval a few days ago, is that a better deal than the one that was struck between the EU and the US, or is it problematic to have this kind of trade liberalization now?
In my view, this raises issues because, what is the hope of the European Union in this Mercosur agreement? This is to sell manufactured goods, so that will be especially beneficial for Germany currently. And we are opening our markets for foods and agri-food products where we know that the standards are not similar in the European Union today and is Mercosur. So there is a big risk to see lower quality products flooding into the European Union market. So this is why France has, since the start, been very reluctant to this type of agreement. So this is very different from the trade deal which we have with the US, which is really on goods which are much more similar, I would say, than with Southern American countries. And it looks like the European Union, seeing that it's not going to be as easy to sell to the US, is going to try to sell its goods elsewhere. And that's probably not the best strategy to do at the moment.
We're also going to probably see a backlash from the farming sector in Europe, and that's particularly difficult in France, Yves, because there's sort of this perfect storm brewing, isn't there, of farmers here in France opposing Mercosur and the political stability and big economic problems that France has with its budget deficit. How do you see all of this coming together, particularly with the political problems we're seeing at the moment in France?
Well, it's true that the French authorities are in a difficult situation because they were very offensive against this EU trade deal with Mercosur, which will work. I mean, it will be signed, it will be ratified, I believe, because it's about geopolitics first and foremost. In the world where you have the Trump administration, Russian Putin and Chinese very aggressive, we need to find reliable partners and to find, opportunities for our exports. So when you deal with the farming sectors, some farmers are very happy in France, by the way. Wines and spirits. We would sell much more wines and spirits in the Mercosur. But in some sectors, the beef, in particular chickens, yes, there are issues. So I agree with this. The question mark for France and for Europe at large is: do we only follow the particular interest of some sectors of the farmer industry, or do we try and serve the European general interest, France general interest, including by giving guarantees to the farmers, because they should not lose too much. So there are guarantees in terms of ceilings, in terms of quantities of imports we would do from Mercosur. Apparently, Paris negotiating during the summer break some safeguard clauses, some financial mechanism. So I think all in all, despite the protest of the farmers putting pressure on a very weak government, very weak president, well, there should be a deal between the EU and Mercosur during the next few months.
We'll see if those safeguards actually convince farmers ultimately. But just on one final point, Catherine Mathieu, what is the price tag, if you will, of continuing political instability in France and inability to control the budget deficit?
The main point in economic terms is the uncertainty. Both companies and households do not know which government we are going to have, which budget we are going to have. So there is a lot of uncertainty, and this impedes investment, this impedes fall in the savings ratio. That's the main point. That's how we have a price in the short term for the absence of a budget. And that's probably going to last for a while, because there is this situation where we run a public deficit of more than 5% of GDP. Each government will want to reduce it and bring it closer to the 3% of GDP limit for deficits in the European Union. So this is obviously going to need to implement strong cuts in spending or increases in taxes, and there is no agreement at that point in the French political circle and in the French population.
We'll leave it there, but thank you so much for both of you, both of your thoughts, Catherine Mathieu and Yves Bertoncini, and of course we'll follow closely all those political developments here in France. Glad you could join us here on this edition of Talking Europe.